There are no more press conferences. I guess it's just time for the Rose Bowl. This is Bill Landis. That's Jeremy Birmingham. I am Austin Ward. This is the Roosters Playoff Report. Look, it's got the logo and everything. We're ready for the game. We heard from Ryan Day and Dan Lanning on Tuesday morning to kick off New Year's Eve. The party has begun. What a riveting press conference it was.
We all kind of sound like the party's begun. Yeah.
Is this not what my voice normally sounds like?
No, nor mine. Not a particularly newsworthy news conference, I don't think. I guess maybe the biggest thing was, which is funny, like Ryan Day says, we're healthy. It's like, when you're missing 2 starting offensive linemen, how healthy are you actually? But I think maybe from like a bumps and bruises, players who are available standpoint, they feel pretty good about the position that they're in. And he said they're playing as fast and as violent as they have all season.
Fast, fresh, and violent.
That one time.
Yeah.
They did. But no, I think it's important just to, when we looked at the Tennessee game injury report before game, we're like, oh, there's no one on it. So we know who's out. You don't have to worry about the game time decisions. You don't have to worry about the last minute injury updates. And so from that perspective, you go into this, all systems go. I want to.
Did you sorry, not to cut you off. Ryan Day's answer to like how healthy are you was like pretty positive, and Dan Lanning's was like, oh, we're relatively healthy.
Well, Dan Lanning has the flu apparently.
Yeah, maybe that's why.
I don't know if he had the flu. He was smiling the entire time. I don't know.
The internet said Dan Lanning and all of Oregon had the flu.
There were some raspy fellas in Oregon.
So maybe they all have the flu.
Yeah.
It's possible. I do want to just zoom out and about this, just the nature and the state of college football. When you have those two coaches in there at 45 years old and 38 years old, like the game is in really good shape with the people in charge of it, other than the people in charge of those people. You know what I
mean? Yeah.
Like they get the interesting questions today that were asked that they couldn't answer about like the future.
They could.
Yeah, but they don't want.
They're not going to.
You can't answer them today. You can't.
I know they're not going to. That's why it's weird that they were asked them the day before the Rose Bowl.
But, about NIL, coaches being sued.
You wouldn't ask about the Florida State basketball program getting sued?
Yeah.
Rose Bowl football process.
I mean, super relevant for the college football playoff quarterfinal at the Rose Bowl presented by Prudential.
It's pretty stupid to ask those questions today. But there's nothing else to talk about. And like this could have been an email, essentially, is what it comes down to.
This press conference absolutely could have been an email.
But
of a photo of Dan Lanning and Ryan Day standing with the trophy.
On the beach, maybe. They could have gone to Manhattan Beach with Spencer.
Hermosa Beach.
They went to both beaches.
I mean, your point is valid, Berm, that these two are two of the, I don't know,
if you look at the
4 or 5 most important coaching faces in college football.
If you look at the quarterfinals, look at the ages of the head coaches. Like the game, James Franklin is probably like the oldest, right? I mean, Kirby's young, Marcus is young, Dan and Ryan are young.
They're all relatively new.
Like Boise State's head coach is like 15 years old.
Second year, yeah. Kenny Dillingham is legitimately 17 years old.
So Sark and James Franklin are the oldest guys, and they're still relatively young guys. Like the future of college football is in really great hands, I think, when it comes. But you could see more and more like the frustration when it comes to being asked those types of questions, because they're like, well, I would love to say that we need a shit ton of help, but we're not going to get it.
Well, the problem is...
Sorry. It's early.
It's early in the morning here.
Very early.
The problem is like, we can ask them for their thoughts and opinions on how things should change, but then like they're not actually asked by the people who are making the decisions. So they're just kind of along for the ride, which is part of the problem.
But they're included in the calls.
They're told afterwards what's happening.
But I guess that's what made it so bizarre. Like, these are two of the most influential voices in college football, but if you want to ask them questions about the format of the playoff or NIL or the transfer portal or the calendar, then that needs to be done at Big Ten Media Days in July and not necessarily here. And I understand this is how it works. I've been doing this for a long time. You have press conferences the day before the game, and we've been talking about this game not quite for a full month because of the change in format, but for a week and a half, and all the X's and O's about the game have been covered. And even when you tried to broach that sort of conversation, was the one moment of levity that Ryan Day brought to the press conference was like, should I just hand the game plan over to Dan Lanning here on my left? Like, there's nothing really else left to say about this game. So actually there's plenty to say about it, but the coaches aren't going to be participating in that conversation anymore. And they're definitely not going to be weighing in about Florida State basketball, which I know we were all hoping that they would.
I actually showed up for that. I'm a little disappointed I didn't get an answer. I did think the exchange about so Ryan Day was asked about the impact of explosive plays in the first game. Obviously, they had a tremendous impact. and like what the plan is to not allow that to happen this time, which of course he's not going to answer, which led to the moment that you just shared. But both, and maybe it's an obvious thing, but both coaches I think were in agreement that when you have two teams that are this talented, and maybe especially two teams that have played already once this season, that it will come down to who creates the most of those explosive plays, who finds the best way to limit them, or like create an explosive play on defense. I can't remember that there wasn't an interception.
Mm-hmm. Just the fumble.
Just the fumble. Yeah. So there wasn't the Derek Carmen fumble was a pretty important play in hindsight, but
it was huge.
Like a you know it in the moment as it's happening, like kind of game changing defensive play. I don't think that sort of happened in that game. And maybe that can be the thing that swings this one. But I think, yeah.
Well, you go back to that game, it's 7-0 Ohio State. They force a punt. They get the ball after the offense just carved like butter, and then they fumble at the 20.
It was super important, yeah.
But in the moment, you're like, it's fine. It's early, not a big deal.
Yeah.
Very early.
I felt the opportunity that they let get away from there was what Ohio State let get away with that fumble was critical. I thought in the moment, there was plenty of game left, but I did think that was that critical defensive play. And there was another one on special teams as well. So, I think it's fair to include that and lump that in there with, obviously a game-changing play, but, really a turnover for Ohio State. Certainly an extra possession for Oregon. So there were two of them. You can flip a coin and say which one was more impactful. The onside kick happened later than the fumble. We all know what happened offensively down the stretch for Ohio State, but those are two pivotal plays. We talked about it earlier on the daily and bold predictions. Like if they don't have everything bounce Oregon's way, the first matchup goes very different, and maybe the Rose Bowl does too.
Yeah, and I thought Dan Lanning was trolling when he said Ohio State special teams have been very good.
I said he was lying.
He's just being nice.
But it's you go to that game, and we talk a lot. We've talked about that game a lot since October 12th, and the conversation about the explosive plays can't be ignored. But I think we also seem to forget that both teams only scored 10 points in the second half of that game, and Ohio State adjusted at halftime of that game. Those explosives were all happening in that 6-minute stretch of the second quarter for Oregon.
Yeah.
It wasn't, you gave up the one run to Dylan Gabriel that scored ultimately the winning touchdown, but that's a 31-yard touchdown run where a linebacker just took a bad angle. We've seen substantial growth in Sonny Styles since then, and I don't know that would happen again if the situation was replayed exactly the same. But Ohio State made adjustments in the second half. So the question, I don't think either team goes into this game expecting that the number of explosive plays that Oregon had is reachable again. I think that it was an anomaly, not just in that game, but like in the season.
Yeah.
And the results obviously led to the outcome. But Oregon, as you talked about on this morning's, bold predictions, like that's not their MO. They're not a attack downfield all season long type of team, which they probably should be, to be honest. I'm actually surprised they're not with their receiver weapons and as accurate as Dylan Gabriel is, but they are a run the ball first type of team, and that's where this game will ultimately be won. And again, we didn't hear about X's and O's today, but they both talked about how execution is going to win this game, and they know whichever team makes the fewest mistakes is going to win.
Do you guys think that they're going to? Dan Lanning was talking about this. He mentioned it yesterday and he mentioned it today. When you have played and there's that familiarity, like obviously you lean most on what you do really well, but you have to find something to change, some kind of little tweak, a trick play, a different formation, something like that. Do you think we'll see a lot of that? Like I think Oregon. Dan Lanning said Oregon is about innovation. I think he was talking about like the entity, not just the football program. But I'm a little bit on alert for like Oregon to come out and junk it up a little bit. I think they've had a lot of time to think about this.
I think Oregon definitely will.
They're like Rutgers with talent.
Well said.
Huh, interesting.
Where they just like try stuff. Mm-hmm. Ohio State doesn't need to do that because the wrinkle Ohio State needs to add is what you talked about with Will Howard again on this morning's bold predictions. Like you don't have to get junky. You just have to say, well, we have this 6'5", 240-pound quarterback who can run. If you add that element to the run game and actually rely on it and force them to defend it. Ohio State beat Miami in the 2002 national championship game because Craig Krenzel had 16 carries. You just have to do something that's a little bit different. And if it's about equating numbers to help the run game, or if it's just about getting their defensive ends to not play so aggressive. Like, the Buckeyes don't need to do trick plays. They don't need to. They haven't. So I don't expect to see it start now.
Yeah, I don't think we'll. But we saw like some of the stuff they were doing against Tennessee with like the motions and the two back stuff and like spamming counter more like that. Yeah. That's at least a change up. It's not a trick play, but it is a creativity.
Yeah, I think it means different things for these two teams because
that's a good point.
For Ohio State, that just means a more creative game plan, whether that's misdirection, counter, as you said, some of the throwback tight end stuff that we've seen that has had success, not lining up and thinking that they have to prove how tough they are.
Has that ever worked for Ohio State?
Generally, no. When it comes to innovation for Ohio State, it is actually just letting Ryan Day and Chip Kelly do the things that are more creative than virtually every other coach or coordinator in the country. That is their hallmark. They have schemes that are on the cutting edge with their passing attack for Ryan Day, with the rushing schemes for Chip Kelly. They did not do that on November 30th, point blank, period. When they did it against Tennessee, they did not need to fancy anything up or dig into the bag of tricks or have a quarterback, a halfback pass or let a Mecca throw the football. Those things exist in Ohio State's playbook. They could do that, but because this is still a game where they have the more talented roster. I get the idea that they don't need to do that. Oregon, they are incredibly good. They are the number one seed. They're undefeated. They're the Big Ten champion. They beat Ohio State already. Their roster top to bottom is still not better than Ohio State's. For them, they have to find different ways to catch Ohio State off guard, in my opinion, to win the game. Yeah. And I think they will definitely try that. We know for certain that Dan Lanning will go for aggressive situations on fourth down.
Two-point conversions.
He's going to onside kicks, everything else. We saw that in the first matchup. He'll do that again. He's not afraid to do that. I think that's one of the most admirable traits that Dan Lanning has, and he's been burned by it in games, and it has not stopped him. So I give him all the credit in the world for that. But it does go back to, at the end of the day, in a matchup like this for him, they have to find different edges because their roster 1 to 85 is not as good as Ohio State's.
And that's right. That's a good distinction between the two. And Ohio State was pretty creative in the first game too, like with some of the
until Josh Simmons got hurt.
Yeah.
The game plan.
I rather like that game plan until Simmons got hurt, and then it kind of got constricted a little bit. So I think Ohio State. It's a point well made. I think both teams will do that kind of in their own way, but I think Oregon's version of that will be much more kind of in your face.
Well, that's what the coaches said on Tuesday morning, is that we know what each team does well. The teams have to do the things they do best, and then find a way to add a wrinkle. And I don't know that Ohio State, again, to what your point is, like these teams are going to do it in a very different way. So Ohio State's coming out and letting Will Howard stay clean, letting the passing game get going to set up whatever else Ohio State does. Like, that's when they're at their best. Oregon, when they're at their best, is when they're running the ball and gashing you in the run game and then allowing Dylan Gabriel to take shots instead of relying on that. So it's like they're kind of inverted with what they do best and then how you change up. So it should be the game of the year, I think. If the first one wasn't, the second one should be.
It's got the opportunity to. And I said the time for talking was over. That was a lie on my part. We have road breaks later on. Bill's got 3 more shows to do on Kings today.
Is that tea with honey in it?
No, this is coffee, but I might need to go to tea. Yeah, we Doug and I are doing like an hour-long show, like only about this game, in like an hour.
What time? Eastern time?
2. Yeah.
Yes, 2.
That's coming. Road Breaks, presented by Card Collector 2. That is coming as well. That'll be the last show for the 3 of us together until we get out to the Rose Bowl on New Year's Day. So there is still more to break down. We'll be answering your questions on Road Breaks, as always, if you want to get those in at the last minute on subtext. If you're a subscriber, feel free to do so. We'll be looking for those, and we'll be tearing into some Bowman Chrome U Sapphire as we break down whatever is left to talk about with Ohio State and Oregon. Thanks to Roosters for bringing you the playoff report. Appetizer Tuesday is going on right now.
They're open till 5 today.
Open till 5. So go celebrate that and get ready. There's some football on already. So thanks for joining us on this episode, the final Roosters playoff report before we get out to the Rose Bowl on Wednesday. That's Bill Landis and Jeremy Birmingham. I am Austin Ward. We'll talk to you later.